We will be continuing on with the next few chapters of Side Quest by Stephanie K. Clemens. Stephanie K. Clemens, I met her at a convention. I was very interested in her books because I was an advanced reader for Mundane Mornings and Enchanted Evenings. It was a cottagecore fantasy series, anthology kind of thing. I might read that for my, if I want, I might read that next time around. It's like one of my favorite cottagecore stories. It's like 12 Dancing Princesses meets Midsummer's Night Dream. But anyway, we shall continue with side quests by Stephanie K. Clemens. I am the Wisteria Witch, and I will be reading to you live. Side Quest, Chapter 5. The chicken must die. Legends speak of dragons and demons. No one warns you about poultry and pyromancy. By the time the clerics let them through, Kaelin had sworn by 3 new oaths never to step foot near parchment again. They weren't written down. If they were, she would have set them on fire and scattered the ashes just to be sure they were truly destroyed. Now, all she wanted to do was get as far away from the toll station as possible. She might have been tired, but if she was forced to deal with any more bureaucracy today, she would be leaving Mercy, sheathed, and using another one of her daggers. Whisperthorn was feeling neglected lately. Look, a stream! Tobias pointed like a kid spotting his first unicorn. We had to stay here for the night. It's so relaxing. Just what we need after, well, you know. She considered slipping away while he was distracted. It wouldn't be hard, her shadow vanished quieter than most people's footsteps. But Timber had already committed treason by splashing happily in the stream like a puppy. Tobias threw a stick. Her dog swam after it, snapping the stick instead of bringing it back. Kaelin sighed. It appeared the decision of where to sleep had been made for her. It was a rather picturesque spot, not that she'd admit it to anyone, not even herself. You should rest. Tobias tried to help her with the pack. She shrugged him off. It's not like she needed his help. Travel companions made very wary, too many bodies to keep safe. I can at least cook for us. He could not cook for them. That was a skill that Tobias did not possess. He struggled with a well-appointed kitchen, so cooking over a campfire was a challenge he was not prepared to handle. The smell of scorched bacon drifted across the camp like a warning. Kaelin briefly considered adding Tobias to her list of things she'd kill before breakfast, right between mercenaries and bureaucrats. Instead, she sighed the sigh of the tragically overworked and took over. Years of being on the road, camping in random places, had helped her develop certain skills like cooking an edible dinner on an open fire. She finished cooking what was left of the bacon, toasted some bread, and constructed a pretty tasty sandwich. So since we were stuck together, why don't we get to know each other? Tobias needed to fill the silence with something. I'll go first. I was attending university for mages, but it was also theoretical. 5 years ago, I left to learn magic out in the world. You know, the hands-on approach. Kaelin deadpan. Congratulations. You burned the bacon. Consider yourself graduated. My family's still disappointed with me, convinced I made the worst decision ever. Tobias took a bite of his dinner. What about you? Why are you on the road? She stared at him, said nothing, took a bite of her sandwich, and yes, the classic companion dinner. One offers a confession about life's purpose, and the other contributes bread, bacon, and brooding. Balanced, really. Timber stole the rest of Tobias' sandwich before padding over to lay next to Kaelin, laying her head in the assassin's lap. Kaelin pretended not to notice. She didn't smile. She definitely didn't. If anyone suggested she had, she would stab them with Whisperthorn for variety's sake. The poor dagger deserved attention. Kaelin was ready early in the next morning. Not only she was ready, she was impatient to get going. If things had gone as planned, she'd be in Eldreach in the next 2 days. Instead, she was still over a week away. She had an incompetent new companion, a disloyal dog, and was lacking in her favorite snack, cheese. A quick glance around the camp confirmed everyone was still asleep. She growled in frustration but stuck around, all the while silently listing everything she could stab in her vicinity, and which of her daggers she would use to do so. Her dagger glass fire was thought of a lot. I'm not sure why Kaylin didn't leave everyone behind. Actually, I do know, but it's more fun watching her pretend she doesn't. Did you say something? Tobias stepped out of his tent, stretching like a cat in the sun after an extremely satisfying afternoon nap. Kaylin rolled her eyes. It's time to get on the road. She turned to her pack on Ed. Ed is the horse, in case if you forgotten. Kaylin certainly hadn't. He was the only one who listened without arguing. Can we? Tobias started. About 5 years ago, I was in town. There was a fire-breathing chicken. They contained it, but maybe we can check. Her head moved so fast a muscle in her neck protested. Did you say fire-breathing chicken? Yeah, I think his name was Percival. He rubbed the back of his neck. Why in the world would I care what a chicken's name is? She crossed her arms, intrigued despite knowing better. And by knowing better, I mean she's done this exact thing before and it ended with scorch marks and stitches. Did she learn? No. But don't tell her I said that. Tobias smiled. He's Scorch's mascot. He delivered the response with a smooth indifference of someone who had clearly never been attacked by livestock. Kaylin's glare was sharper than her extra dagger. You want me to go to town that's made the decision that a fire-breathing chicken is its mascot? The goofy grin and querulous shrug had her counting the numbers of ways she could use Moonveil, another dagger named after an extinct flower, to cause pain without killing him. They have an excellent cheese shop there, too, Tobias added, as if a good smoked Gouda was a deciding factor for her to risk her third-degree burns from poultry. Kaylin stopped, hand frozen mid-air as a conflict between her desire for murder or mozzarella created an internal debate that left Moonveil alone in its sheath. Cheese was not just a snack, it was perfection. Some might even say destiny. Aged for 12 months and wrapped in wax. Tinder's head popped up, clearly not actually sleeping, despite the raucous snoring that had been the soundtrack of the morning. It was quite apparent that the two shared a love of cheese. While Timber did prefer bacon, her next favorite food was a sharp cheddar. Kayla would never admit it out loud, but cheese was her Achilles heel. Hey, we have someone in the chat. Welcome, welcome. Glad to have you here. Okay, let me just pause for a moment here because this is a lot of words. And it's Comey. Hey Comey, how are you? We are reading Side Quests by Stephanie K. Clemens. Kayla would never admit out loud, but cheese was her Achilles heel. Well, that and emotionally vulnerable conversations. The cheese was more likely to kill her. Which is why, after only a brief moment of hesitation, these words fell from her lips. We might as well head into Scritch. Tobias quite literally jumped with joy, tripped over his cloak, stumbled 3 steps directly into Timber, who he had tried to avoid, but she leapt to her feet, moved directly in her path he was careening down, causing him to flip arse overhead, landing on his back, staring at the sky. And thus, Tobias began his morning ritual of gravity appreciation. Enthusiasm only causes trouble. Let's go. So we have time for the chicken. Kaylin didn't laugh. She wanted to, but laughing was a chink in her armor that she would never abide. She led Ed away from the campsite so no one could see her struggle with her pack, her patience, or the undeniable pull of dairy products. She was still leading Ed when they passed through the now entering Scritch sign. Not that she needed to know exactly where she was. The oversized rooster burning down the winter solstice decorations was singing "Caw caw," clued her in. The fire brigade, 2 gnomes and a goat, were trying to stop the destruction, but they were no match for a bird 3 times the size of a golden retriever. Kaylin rolled her eyes back and took one step towards the melee in front of her, but she was almost run over by someone in a chef's hat. Finlow Quickwisk ran the pyrotechnic poultry, yelling, "I swear I didn't use magic this time." He waved a wooden spoon over his head as if he wielded a dangerous weapon. "It was a cream-based casserole. It shouldn't have caused flames. Indigestion maybe, but not fire." Brenna Birchbake stood in the doorway of her cheese shop, arms folded, shaking her head. The only sign of amusement was a quick twitch of her lips before she sighed and chased after her husband. You might not know Finlow and Brenna. Kaylin certainly didn't. But I'm told that the TALES librarian has a copy of their story, or as I like to call it, Percival's origin story. Yes, the fire-breathing rooster was the great Percival, town mascot of Scritch. Whether he liked it or not, most days he didn't mind. Today was not one of those days. Kaylin sighed. She wanted to ignore the foul, go to the cheese shop and buy some Havarti. After all, her goals were much like the goals of everyone else. Stab it, buy cheese, leave town. Her hand hovered over the dagger as the poultry approached the cheese shop. There wasn't much that would force her to act except protecting a pound of provolone. That apparently ranked higher than most people. Provolone always kept its promises with its beautiful nutty flavor and creamy texture. The patting of paws stopped beside her. Timber eyed the cheese shop and howled, which did nothing to bring attention to them. After all, the tinsel was signed, and all there left of the snowman was a sad puddle with a smoking corncob pipe. Watching destruction didn't bother the assassin, but she could tell it bothered the townsfolk, especially when all that remained of the decorated tree was a pile of ash and a cinnamon-smelling puff of smoke. The town's fire brigade was racing towards the open fire. Well, the goat was. 2 gnomes were moving much slower, wary of Percival would do next. The gnome's reluctance was the main reason the goat was in charge, despite his habit of chasing his tail in an emergency. At least he wasn't afraid of the rooster. Auntie Time was screaming about turning Finlow into a scone for real this time. No one noticed Kaylin, her companion creature, or Ed standing there. Not many people noticed her, and if they did, the Black Hood normally convinced them to pretend they didn't. Tobias let out a loud whistle as he stumbled his way towards her, brushing soot from his cloak and only managing to smear it worse. He shaded his eyes like a man admiring a sunrise, not a rooster-induced inferno. "This is worse than what I've hoped." "What is worse than you expected?" she muttered. He grinned, fishing through his pockets until he found his notebook. He squinted through a haze of smoke and he flipped through his pages until he found whatever he was looking for. Snapping the book closed, he looked up to her. "Expected? Oh, I never expected the worst. I only hope. Hope's shinier." Her glare promised the pain of 1,000 paper cuts. "That's a good way to get yourself killed." "Maybe," Tobias said as he reached in his pocket. When he pulled it out, his fingers shimmered. He flickered glitter from his thumbs so it sparkled in smoky air. "But at least I'll die fabulous." Kaylin's dagger, his hand twitched. She avoided glitter the same way she avoided feelings. They were both messy, lingering, impossible to scrape off. Provolone was one thing. Glitter poultry was another. Then Tobias did the most Tobias thing. He reached for her hand, gentle, earnest. "You can't stab Percival." Kaylin froze. She didn't know his touch. Never had. And Tobias seemed to realize it too, because the moment stretched a beat longer, until awareness flickered, sharp as a blade. Safer thought, stab him. Simpler. Daggers never asked what a touch meant. Why did you bring me here if it wasn't to kill the chicken? She snapped, voice sharp enough to cover the unsettling flicker of awareness. And here, dear reader, we have the most romantic scholars call a moment. Please don't tell Kaylin that. She might stab me too. We can take care of Percival, not kill him. The town would never forgive us. He dropped her hand as if it burned him, and instinctively patted Ed's flank. The glittering handprint he'd left on the horses made Kaylin consider not only stabbing him, but also burning his fashion sense. She kept her dagger sheathed for now. If I'm not going to stab the chicken, what do you suggest I do? I wish I could say Tobias had a plan, but that would be a lie, and there's no reason to lie. Yet. Something to extinguish the fire. Tobias snapped his fingers over his head as if he had something revolutionary. A dessert? Custard, maybe? It helps with dragons. It could work on chickens. Sounds too simple. Her tone was as flat as an abandoned pancake after Sunday brunch. It was at this point Brenna heard the newcomers and dragged Finlow over to them. I hate to interrupt, but we've tried tarts, donuts, even souffle, even after that one incident. She eyed Finlow. But that's neither here or there. The fire-breathing always returns. You don't have to tell everyone about the sentient souffles. It's been years since that happened. Finlow sighed, eyeing the rooster warily. Brenna smiled. I didn't tell them. You did. I remember you two. Tobias bounced from one foot to another. This all started because of your savory tart, and you... He pointed to Brenna. You own the cheese shop. Kaylin's head snapped towards the young woman like she just whispered the holy word. Cheese. Timber sat at her feet, eyes wide with canine devotion. Both assassin and hound realized their dreams of dairy might come true. For Kaylin, she was now determined to disarm Percival. Timber, on the other hand, hoped her woeful eyes would do the trick. Follow me, Brenna waved the group on. That is, if you're serious about helping with Percival. Timber followed first, then Kaylin, leading Ed along with her. Tobias had been distracted, so he scurried to catch up. Why would anyone name a rooster? Kaylin muttered, especially when they've nothing but trouble. You named the horse Ed, Tobias pointed out. Kaylin stroked her dagger. Tobias gulped. You named him Adolwyn. I refuse to call him by such a ridiculous name. And thus, dear reader, our assassin chose cheese over poultry, restraint over stabbing, and reality over ridiculous names. For now. Kaylin had followed Brenna under the holy conviction that they were heading to the cheese shop. Instead, she found herself in a kitchen where utensils seemed to judge her life choices. For once, she didn't bother hiding the disappointment. Brenna noticed a sag in the assassin's shoulders and the sad eyes of a woman's companion creature. Were you hoping for something different? Timber prodded Brenna, unleashing a whine so tragic it belonged in an opera about lost cheese. No, it's best we go to work neutralizing the chicken. Finlow lunged for a spoon. It dodged with the disdain of a fencing master. He's a rooster, he added primarily, as if taxonomy mattered when things were on fire. Kaylin's eyes bored into him, sharp as Witherspoon, just as deadly. He cleared his throat. Chicken's fine. This is wonderful, vibrating with magic. Where shall we start? Tobias tilted his head. She won't admit it. He all sang, but Kaylin's hoping for cheese. And there, dear reader, he committed the most dangerous act in existence, telling the truth about Kaylin out loud. That's easy enough to do, Brenna smiled before disappearing into the pantry. Tobias tripped over a table leg and stumbled towards a counter. When he reached to steady himself, he accidentally touched the whisk, which he had the audacity to whack him on the hand as he was still careening towards the wooden chair. Somehow he landed arse first into the chair, looking smug as though the whole routine had been intentional. Caitlin's lip twitched before she buried a smile. He didn't deserve encouragement. A giggle escaped before he pulled himself together. I think I have a magic spell that we can infuse the custard with. It should nullify whatever is causing Percival to breathe fire. No magic, Brenna and Finlow yelled together. She came back with a tray so glorious it deserved its own choir. Cheese of every type and scent. Some Caitlin didn't even recognize. For a heartbeat, she forgot the rooster, the fire, and even Tobias. Almost. She pulled her gaze away from the mountain of goodness that was presented before her. Why no magic? Finlow sighed, finding great intent in something on the floor. Cooking and spells don't mix, especially when they're not dragon peppers. That's how we got the pyrotechnic Percival. Should be fine. We won't be using any dragon peppers. Tobias rubbed his chin. I've never caused anything to become a pyromaniac before. There's always a first time, Caitlin added. It wasn't a helpful comment, but it was the first thing that popped in her head. Tobias grinned, his expression didn't match his words. You're not helping. Everyone joined Tobias at the table, including the cheese plate. Outside, the sky lit up as a loud caw-caw echoed through the air. I don't think we can do this without magic, Tobias said. We should avoid the dragon peppers, though. Try something less spicy. Make the custard, Caitlin ordered. Infuse it with something that doesn't include a binding spell, coating Percival in magenta glitter, or calling forth any type of demon. She popped a piece of cheddar in her mouth. I'm going to see what that damn rooster is up to now. She took another handful of cheese and headed outside. Things were calm. Normal even. An old woman walked by. The one who had chased Finlow earlier. Caitlin stopped her. Where's the rooster? Auntie Time shrugged. Left. And good riddance. I don't know why the mayor insisted on a town mascot. We're better off without him. That chicken was a menace before he ate Finlow's gullet. Caitlin didn't say a word. She turned back towards the house, walked straight into the kitchen, where everyone except Timber was working diligently on a custard-filled donut. Tobias stirred at the custard, sprinkling a potion as he did so. I think the custard donut will soothe Percival. I know it would soothe me. We have a problem, Caitlin said. Brenna looked up. Worse than Percival? Percival's gone. As to confirm, a deafening caw-caw split the sky, followed by a suspiciously rooster-shaped shadow sneaking past the window. Gone where? Tobias asked. Caitlin grabbed another fistful of cheddar. Wherever chickens go before a disaster. Tobias turned back to the custard and continued to stir. And there was, dear reader, the moment when everything should have stopped. Should have. Instead, Tobias added more sugar. Finlow scolded him, and Caitlin realized she was the only person in the room who understood that the apocalypse was already loose. Feathered, furious, and probably flammable. Okay, we're going to take a break here really quick. Just going to grab just something to drink before we dive into chapter 6. All right. Now we're on to chapter 6. Potions of regret. Now with extra honesty. Truth, when distilled, is best served in a very small doses, preferably not on an empty stomach, or with traveling companions, or at all, really. Are you finished with your custard bombs or whatever it is you're insistent on calling them? Kaelin paced the length of Finlow's home, itching to stab something and leave, find Percival, disable the rooster, and get back to the mission she had been hired to carry out. Tobias looked up. His, yep. Tobias looked up, his hair dusted with flour. I think so. I've added a preservative spell that uses rosemary for a rope. He paused before muttering, or maybe immortality. This is on top of the extinguishing tonic we added to the custard. Fine, does that mean we can leave? She stopped, hands on her hips. I have things I should be doing, but you insisted on this side quest. Finlow looked up from the bag he was filling with donuts. I hope this works. I let Tobias handle the magic. Food and magic don't really go together for me. Brenna put her hand on his shoulders as if to say thank you, but they didn't need to know that. Tobias sneezed, creating a cloud of flour that hit Kaelin's eye roll. Timber looked longingly at the bag. Those are not for you, unless you start breathing fire. Timber raised an eyebrow, suggesting that could be arranged. Don't even think of it. I'll leave you behind somewhere like the deserts of Saltmer. The dog sighed, pressing her snoot onto Kaelin's empty hand. The assassin rubbed the top of Timber's head without a conscious thought. Finlow handed her the bag. Tobias muttered something about ingredients for healing tonic and snagged a vial of something. Kaelin stared longingly at the barely touched cheese tray as if it was the last bastion of goodness in an otherwise desolate world. Brenna stepped towards her. I packed this for you. It's rind smoked Gouda in case of an emergency. Timber's tail thumped against the floor, its rhythm steady enough to start a contra dance party. If Fate had been paying attention, it would have sent them home. Unfortunately, Fate was too busy laughing, and thus they departed, armed with the pastries and poor decisions, and emergency cheese. How could I forget that important detail? When Tobias tripped over a root, Kaelin caught his elbow without thinking. He blinked, surprised, as if she just performed a miracle instead of basic physics. Don't make it a moment, she warned. He made it a moment anyway. One day and 2 nights passed, and only the sign of Percival was the burned remnants he had left in his wake. But the rooster was nowhere to be found. Kaelin stood in a town looming before her, Ed on her left, Timber on her right. She tossed a dagger in the air, caught it on repeat. This time it was Aurora's End, named for a flower that looked merciful until it wasn't. The only thing missing from the scene was her cloak blowing in the wind. It would have looked majestic. Unfortunately, Tobias had turned the garment into a ferret. The ferret had run away, and now the assassin needed a new cloak. The breeze carried the scent of cinnamon and sanctimony from the town. Kaelin scowled. A town shouldn't smell like snickerdoodles. Timber's tongue lolled out her mouth. She didn't agree with her human. In fact, a cookie sounded really good right now. I should have picked up a health tonic before leaving Scritch, Kaelin muttered to herself and anyone who chose to listen. Tobias shuffled up, carrying 2 plates of something that looked almost edible. Cloverbite is right there. We could stop. Timber sniffed. The acrid smell emanating from the plate had the dog questioning whether it should be consumed. As long as it doesn't delay us, there's a rampaging rooster on the loose. Not to mention my actual mission. The longer it takes me to get to King Varric, the more damage he's gonna do. Kaelin mounted Ed. Tobias hesitated for half a beat, but he couldn't stop himself from asking the question. What is your mission? You don't want to know. Kaelin clicked her tongue and Ed surged forward. Ah, deflection, a necessary skill of the trade. They trotted in silence until they were no longer looking at the town from a distance, but had arrived and stood in front of the building that leaned preciously to the left, almost touching the shop next door. A sign creaking in the wind labeled the troubling building as the apothecary. The letters were barely visible, faded from years of unpredictable weather. Let's go in. Tobias inched forward towards the door. Didn't you say something about wanting a healing spell? And look, they're having a sale. Kayla raised an eyebrow. The shop in the front. Oh, hey, Stryways. Great to have you here. Yes, we should be aware of rampaging roosters. Thank you so much for popping in. I appreciate having you here. Kaylin raised her eyebrow. The shop in front of her looked like it had been dragged through a portal and rebuilt by someone who hated right angles and customer safety. She held her hand to stop Tobias from entering, but the door had already screeched its betrayal. With a roll of her eyes, she followed him inside. Tipper took one sniff, shook her head, and curled up next to Ed. The shop was no place for a dog. Kaylin squinted as her eyes adjusted to the dim lighting and dust motes disturbed by their entrance. Apothecaries should smell like sage and salvation. This one smelled more like burnt sugar and bad decisions. She should have turned around and left. Instead, she pursued the potions, healing salves, elixirs, and tinctures that could double as weapons. She would have shopped longer, but various teapots whistled every time she walked by. Look at all these potions. This one's for hair growth. Ooh, look, emotional stability. And there's your health repair. Tobias turned from one shelf of vials to the next. His excitement vibrated from him in waves. Is that a buy two, get one curse free sale? He picked up a heart-shaped bottle. This one's for love. Then put it down before it attacks you, Kalen said. He grinned. You think I'm irresistible to potions? No, I think you're allergic to good decisions. She thought she heard him mutter something that sounded like a concern over half-off tinctures and posets, but she couldn't be sure. And also in the chat, we have also Pokemon fans. If said rooster had speed boost or can Mega Evolve. Yep. A wizened woman stepped out from behind the shelves, her bones oddly creaking with the steps. Marn has what you're looking for, some things you aren't, at least 3 things that should be left well alone. Just this healing salve and this, Kaylin responded, slipping the family-sized headache potion into the pile. It was almost impossible to ignore the smell of lavender and mothballs emanating from the woman, but Kaylin managed it. Not bad for breathing. Not bad. Too bad. Not breathing wasn't a possibility. If only it stopped there, but Tobias fitted from the shelf to shelf, picking up one bottle after another, only to have them rearrange themselves the moment he sat down. He paused briefly, his eyes flicking to the assassin. Her glare promised consequences. He knew that look, but curiosity was louder than his survival instinct. But he darted from one aisle to the next as eager tonics whispered, "Buy me." However, he managed to ignore the pleas and approach the counter with only a small pouch of what looked like tea in his hand. "We'll take this too." Tobias tossed the pouch onto the counter. He thought it was protection tea labeled Veritas Essence, for when emotional suppression isn't your vibe. So many things would have been avoided if he had carefully read the label. Sometimes it's too late to learn that one should never buy a potion based solely on its aroma. Marne looked at the goods, hesitating over the bad bag of dried something or other Tobias had decided on. "Truth is best done in small doses," she muttered. "My dear reader, foreshadowing rarely comes so clearly labeled. For a moment, Tobias thought about returning the tea to whatever shelf it wanted it. Is it chamomile? If it was, it would require courage to drink it, Marnay responded, cryptic as always. Then she turned to Kalen. That will be 1 silver piece. Kalen glared but paid anyway. I thought this was a sale. More like highway robbery. Highways only rob the easy targets, the old woman sniffed. Potions rob everyone, and they never show remorse. Outside, Timber snored. Shockingly, our assassin and her merry band made it out of Cloverbite unscathed, or so she believed. Kalen walked the perimeter of their campus as Tobias set about making tea to go, along with some scones and sandwiches he managed to purchase without her noticing. Well, he didn't think she'd notice, but she had, and decided to let him have this one. Anything to avoid a burned campfire meal for one night. What she didn't notice was that he used the tea from the apothecary or that it had a warning label about unwanted revelations. If she had, things might turn out differently. Instead, she finished her patrol, sat on a log, took a sip of tea, and set it down before grabbing a beef and cheddar sandwich. Hey, random person, we are just reading stories right now, so sit back and relax and enjoy this chapter of Side Quest. I'm doing fine, just sitting here cozy and just reading. It wasn't before long before everyone had a cup in hand. At first, there was nothing, just silence as each one chewed their food. You scared a void out of me, blurted Tobias. Words meant to stay in his head now reverberated throughout the camp, breaking the companionable silence. Kalen stared at him, eyes wide. His words sound like emotion. She didn't do emotions. Tobias's voice cracked like a spell miscast. He clamped a hand over his mouth, eyes wide in horror. Kalen blinked once, twice. Somewhere, a cricket began a slow death sonata. Tobias wanted to stop, not to say anything more. However, his mouth had other ideas. I can't stop watching you because I never felt safer with anyone. She wanted to glare. Instead, her eyes burned. She hastily swiped away any evidence that she had feelings. That's terrifying, Kalen. He clapped both hands over his mouth, trying to physically hold back the words that wouldn't stop tumbling out. Her hand twitched. Tobias worried she was deciding which dagger would be the best to silence him forever. If only he had known his words might have created a crack in her armor. The campground was quiet. The only sounds in the incessant chirping of an unwanted insect was the sound of their breathing. Kalen wanted to stand, hesitated. Her throat tightened. This wasn't a battle. This was worse. I don't want to be alone anymore. I told myself I do, but lately I've wondered what it'd be like to belong to. She looked at her empty hands. Matters to someone. Her voice was raw, barely louder than a whisper. For a heartbeat, Tobias forgot how to breathe. The assassin who could silence armies had just whispered loneliness into existence. It was way more dangerous than any dagger she'd ever drawn. As soon as the words passed her lips, she reached for Whisperton, as if she could duel her own emotions, which for her would be better than acknowledging them. There it is, dear reader. The thing Kalen would kill to keep hidden, possibly literally. Timber took the assassin to the mage and back. She plodded over, circled twice, and lay down on Tobias's feet, resting her head on Kalen's lap. It was her way of saying, "You're both disasters, but you're my disasters." She closed her eyes and snored so loudly fire spreaded, ending the moment and causing a sigh of relief, but neither of them moved. Kalen muttered, "Even the dog knows how to ruin a moment." "Or save one," Tobias said softly. She pretended not to hear him. Kaylin yanked her cloak around her like armor, glaring at the embers as they burned out. Tobias muttered something about needing new tea. When Tobias fell asleep, the faint light of the moon cast shadows across Kaylin's face. She reached for her dagger, hesitated, then set it back down. Her arm was heavier when no one was trying to break through it. Across the camp, Tobias dreamed of a voice saying his name in the dark, and for once, it didn't sound like a warning. Neither of them ever mentioned what passed between them in that moment, at least not out loud, which, as we all know, meant it lived rent free in both of their heads. Just when the moment calcified into awkwardness, her snatched satchel glowed. The map? Yes, the one from the demigod, lit up. Kaylin stomped over and ripped it out of her bag. Runes sparkled across the surface and then faded until the only thing illuminated was the town of Gravemire, a haunted place of cursed forests, tax-collecting undead, and deeply unfriendly librarians. Disturbed from her slumber, Timber growled at it, then promptly peed on the edge. Kaylin shrugged. That's fair. And with that, their next disaster announced itself with glowing runes and dog pee. All right, we're going to take another break here. We're going to be going into chapter 7. Just going to get a quick drink break. And again, thank you for coming in this evening. I do see a few familiar faces in the chat. Glad to have you all here. All right, chapter 7, The Bard That Wept. Not all songs are born of love. Some are born of beer, questionable bets, the poor life, choices of assassins. The next morning came like all mornings do, too fast and too soon. Kaylin would have overslept if it hadn't been for the loud caw-caw that had the audacity to interrupt her sleep, reminding her of an unfinished quest involving a chicken who should not be ignored. Her nightmares had featured feathers, glowing eyes, and one very smug cluck. The rooster apparently wanted an encore. The message solidified when she stepped out of her tent, and the rooster-shaped shadow streaked across the sky towards parts unknown. Of course, it was also in that moment that the urine-stained map glowed once more. Some quests waited patiently in line, others burned down the 3 villages and demanded your attention. And there were those that simply glowed until you paid attention. Kaylin's head felt like someone had used it to test sword sharpness. Emotional hangers were worse than ails. They didn't fade with time. just waited for eye contact and a small talk to reappear. And Tobias's brand of earnestness was the emotional equivalent of standing barefoot on sincerity. Timber trotted past her with the smug satisfaction of someone who had slept soundly and knew it. Let's go. Gravemere awaits. Caitlin was gruffer than usual this morning, a normal side effect of the unwanted emotional intimacy. Worse than poison. Harder to cure, and far more persistent. Tobias nodded as he shoved the last of his things into his pack. His usual chipperness was muted as they started their daily journey. He kept stealing glances at her, like he was afraid she might evaporate if he had looked away too long. She pretended not to notice, which fooled neither of them. Timber looked from one to another, shook her head, and went to stand by Ed. At least the horse had an emotional range to cope. The other two, questionable. Every step squelched like an insult. The trees leaned close, whispering opinions they couldn't prove. Tobias opened his mouth once, twice, and wisely decided the sound of rain was safe for company. The silence was thick enough to drown in. They trudged, yes. It was one of those days. The ground was muddy, the weather grim, and the mood tense enough to require a massage. The silence that followed them down the road was thick as fog. Rain clung to their cloaks, turning the dirt into sludge, and the golden glow cut through the gloom. When the tavern's noise reached them, Kaelin was almost grateful for it. Noise was easier than thought. The whinkering of wyvern awaited. A bustling roadside tavern, probably haunted, where the bad ideas blossom into even worse decisions. Laughter spilled from the windows, mingling with the smell of ale, roasted nuts, and sorrow. This tavern, like so many others, was a favorite stop for mercenaries, adventurers, and people who owed taxes in at least 3 kingdoms. Instead of entering with caution and nose plugs, they scurried to it like people trying to hide from their own thoughts. The sign above the door winked. Literally. Tobias stopped and to wink back. The sign looked offended. Every tavern, dear reader, claims to be the heart of adventure. Most are closer to its liver. The wyvern's walls lean inward from too many stories being told at once. Somewhere in the rafters, someone laughed or possibly hatch. They had no idea that night before the night was over. Someone would cry into a mug, swear eternal loyalty, and start composing their legend badly. The tavern hosted the infamous midwinter drinking gauntlet, a contest where no one survived with their dignity intact. It was midwinter. They were doomed. The door swung open, welcoming the ragged travelers. Tobias immediately found an excuse to flee. Something about a lute, claiming it had magical properties. It was, of course, on the other side of the room. Timber sniffed, smelled meat, and started to fill her belly. This left the assassin standing there, alone. I see we have a new contestant for the midwinter drinking gauntlet, proclaimed a busy tavern wench as she raised Kaelin's arm as if she volunteered. Kaelin ripped her hand away, shaking her head, but stopped. Maybe a barrel full of ale was just as she needed what she needed. Entering the contest didn't mean she had to win. Of course, she had to win. The Thorn of the North always won. Fine, I'll do it. The chair she grabbed scraped the floor as she moved into place. An orc turned towards her, the horns capped with silver tips. A worthy challenger. I'm Brug Ironthroat, undefeated at the Winking Wyvern, traveling bard and purveyor of regret. Their voice could shatter glass or lull a child to sleep. I only lose to legends. They raised their smug in salute, and the tavern roared in approval. Someone in the corner fainted from excitement or alcohol. It was hard to tell which. And sometimes people mistake the rage drinking for strategy. But, dear reader, it is how most friendships start, and most legends stumble into being. Challengers chosen, the contest began with all the grace of a tavern brawl, wearing its Sunday best. Tankards slammed against the tables, ale sloshed across wooden floors, and the crowd roared with all kinds of enthusiasm only found in the deeply inebriated. Someone started the betting pool. The odds shifted wildly every time Kalen scowled. A gnome shouted for Team Murderface. Tobias, of course, placed his bet on Kalen's survival, not her victory, an important distinction. Kane looked at the foaming tankard of ale in front of her. As much as she thought she didn't need to win, what she saw before her was another mission. She studied each gulp like a tactical maneuver, calculating head tilt, breathing intervals, and splash radius. Brugg took a very different approach, singing between each swig, weaving epic verses about their own magnificence. One tale involved pink horns, a shimmering gown, and a plethora of backup dancers no one else could see. Tobias started clapping in rhythm. Kalen's glare silenced him by the second verse. He mouthed, "Sorry," then immediately clapped again. Tobias, unable to stay away from the assassin for long, whether from spellbinding or sheer fascination, stood watching her drink. His attempts to cheer her on were unique, to say the least. "Don't die," he shouted at one point, followed by the ever-helpful advice, "Drink like you're hydrating after cardio." Kalen ignored him, with a focus for a general plotting a siege. Each gulp felt like a defiance, gravity, destiny, and common sense. Against all odds and alcohol content, Kalen outlasted Brugg. The bard collapsed with a kind of drama that suggested both heartbreak and performance art. Moments later, they rose again, tears streaming, already composing a ballad about their noble demise. Kalen didn't know how it was an orc bardic tradition that losing a drinking contest meant pledging eternal artistic servitude, which was how she found herself the unwilling muse of a bard who rhymed destiny with ale and me. Now Brugg was on verse 2. Kalen sat shaking her head as the song continued on and on. The crowd erupted with applause as Brugg finished and kneeled before Kalen. She tried to scooch away but was trapped by everyone who wanted to congratulate her. "You are my muse." They clutched at their heart. The silver on their horns caught the light. "My undying loyalty is yours, as is my continued song." Kalen's eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape route, a trapdoor, maybe even divine intervention, anything to end this moment. Brugg stood, raising their hand and horns to the sky. "I will chronicle your every deed, triumph, and dramatic sigh." "What about my exasperated eye rolls?" she muttered. "I don't want a bard, a follower, a reminder of my heroics." Timber put her paws on Brugg's chest and licked their face. Tobias clapped his hands like this was the best thing he's ever heard. He looked at Kalen, pride softening into something dangerously found. "You inspire loyalty," he said quietly, "even when you don't mean to." She nearly choked on her ale. Kalen had been praised before by generals, by clients, by corpses, but never like this. Praise without exception felt heavier than any blade. Tobias saw it too, the flicker of something human beneath her scowl. And thus, dear reader, Destiny acquired a background vocalist. And thus, Team Chaos acquired a soundtrack, whether Kalen liked it or not. She nodded in acceptance of fate. She would have preferred stabbing it, but that didn't seem like to be an option. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective, Brugg sang their first ode to Kalen, a ballad so heartfelt and ridiculously poetic that it moved half the tavern to tears. The mage wept openly. "It's definitely the onions." He sniffled onto his sleeve. "It was not the onions." Kalen glared daggers. At least she didn't unsheath any of them, but some small part of her, a traitorous part, liked what she heard. because for the first time, someone was praising her not as a tool, not as a blade, but as a person. She didn't know what to do with that, so she ordered another drink. And somewhere behind her, Brug began verse 2. That night, Kaylin's tolerance for affection would never be the same. Neither, unfortunately, would be the volume of her mornings. The tavern smelled of stale triumph and regret. Timber halfway through someone's breakfast by the time Kaylin finished packing. You're quiet, Tobias said. Plotting or hungover? Yes, she replied. Kaylin went from one hangover to another, but she much preferred the one caused by too much ale. What she didn't appreciate was the singing orc who followed her out of the tavern, cheerfully joining the group as if it was a foregone conclusion. What are you doing here? She tightened the straps on Ed's saddle. Brug bowed with a sweeping gesture. Last night I swore to sing your acts of heroism, which by binding oath and creative inspiration means you're stuck with me. Kaylin sighed. Not another one. Can I sing with you? Tobias asked, slinging his pack over his shoulder. They gasped, clutching their heart and tears filling their eyes. I would be honored if you joined me. This is going to be so much fun. Tobias clapped. There might have been glitter. There's always glitter. No one ever knew where he got it. Before Kaylin could stop him, the orc scooped Tobias up and spun him in a circle. Timber lunged forward, stopping when Brug set Tobias down. And who are you? They dug to their pouch. Do you like jerky? I have extra here somewhere. Ah, there it is. Hey, Ramses. We're just wrapping up Chapter 7, going into Chapter 8. And just like that, Timber accepted the bard onto their team. As they rode out together, Brug began strumming a new song, The Assassin That Outdrank the World. Every found family begins with a mistake. Some with blood. This one, mercifully, began with ale, and the faint promise of harmony, though no one believed it yet. All right, I'm going to take a quick break before we go into Chapter 8. I hope you're enjoying side quests so far. While we take the break, I'd like to hear your thoughts in the chat. All right, we are back from our very quick break before we go into Chapter 8. Let's see, also I found the book in my library's Kupla collection. Yay! Yeah, I'm really enjoying this book so far, and I always tell people support indie authors. Stephanie Clemens writes amazing fantasy, and this book so far has been a lot of fun. LitRPG has been such a popular genre lately, and we're missing a lot of female voices in lit RPGs, so support authors like Stephanie K. Clemens, especially if you want to dive into this genre of literature. Chapter 8. Ruins of Regret. Even assassins bleed. They're just better at hiding it. Your satchel's glowing again, Kaylin, Tobias observed. In that deeply unhelpful way he could only pull off. Do you think it's tracking Percival? Kaylin didn't even look at the map. It's illuminating Gravemire again. Still, it clearly wants us there now, but we're going to have to deal with the order of binding contracts if we stay on our current route. Tobias sighed. He might have rolled his eyes. Are we going to face them up again? Who exactly is the Order of Binding Contracts? Brugg asked, harmonizing with nature and all the sounds it had to offer. Bureaucracy at its most painful, Kalen answered. Did you just sing that? Tobias tilted his head. Timber howled. Kalen put one foot in front of the other. I agree, Timber. We need another way. Ed shook his head and neighed. What's that, Ed? You have a suggestion? Tobias asked, knowing that the horse wouldn't respond. Brugg stopped. I was told of a shortcut back at the Winking Wyvern. We could make our way through the petrified forest of Vera and straight into the ruins of Regret. Their eyes gleamed. Just think of the verses, the tragedy, the perfectly timed key changes. Tobias paused. The ruins of Regret? That sounds ominous. How much time could we save? Helen tapped the toe of her boot in the dirt. If this is the order of binding contracts is as bad you say, half a fortnight, maybe more. Brugg shrugged. Kalen nodded, indicating the orc should lead the way. They might avoid paperwork, but the emotional tax would be unavoidable. They followed the bard when they turned off the main road, leading them into a narrow path where vines reached out to stop them or give them high fives depending on the time of day. Kalen swatted one away before it could decide. Hours later, as the sun dipped low and Brugg's sons turned from triumphant ballads to haunting hums, they found a clearing. Tobias scorched dinner. Kalen and Timber hung back, watching it all. She was itching to continue her journey, but it was time to rest before they walked into the petrified forest. The next morning came fast and furious. No one was ready to get up and start moving. Come on, guys! We have a forest to visit and ruins to conquer, Tobias said with his normal enthusiasm before stretching. Are we really headed to a place where every tree has turned to stone? Brugg stepped out of their tent, polishing the silver on their tusk. It's better than just some stone trees. The locals say the forest remembers fear. The same curse that turns trees to stone can do the same to travelers, showing them their deepest regrets before it claims them. Sounds like a good time. Kalen led Ed to the trail, not waiting for anyone to follow, not surprisingly. Timber was right by her side. Brugg quietly played their lute as they made their way to the forest past singing flowers, dancing dryads, and one babbling brook. Before long, they stood in front of stone trees. This place hums in a minor key, Brugg strummed. Sounds more like screaming to me, Kalen muttered. Timber pushed her snoot into Brugg's pouch and walked away with giant pieces of jerky. Tobias tried to collect a sample, accidentally chipping a tree. The moan that reverberated around them came from somewhere within the stone grain. The air thickened, heavy with a kind of silence that even made Timber stop panting. It just wasn't just quiet. It was listening. Never trust forests that don't move in the wind. Stillness isn't natural. The forest thinned into ruins, ancient stone half swallowed by petrified roots. The air itself hummed, alive with old illusion magic. This is academically invigorating, Tobias said, voice climbing half an octave too high. I wonder what the acoustics are like. Brugg didn't wait for an answer before strumming a chord that echoed through the ruins like a laughter in a tomb. Pretty sure the acoustics are perfect for screaming, Kalen muttered. Timber padded along beside her. The dog could feel everyone's unease, but it wasn't sure what was causing it. This will save time. It will be worth it, she insisted. Shortcuts never save time. The air shifted, pressure static, the kind that prickles along your spine. They all felt it, and no one said a word, but each of them saw something. It began as echoes in the stones surrounding them, shadows flickering through the petrified trunks. The illusion solidified into each person's deepest fears. Kalen saw her younger self kneeling before a field target, blade trembling. the sound of her own ragged breathing echoing like someone else's. Then Stride appeared, too vivid, too close, finishing the job with effortless precision. I taught you to be unbreakable. Stride's commendations was soft but cruel. You're a disappointment. A waste of my time. Worthless. Kaelin turned away, swiping at her face before the tears could fall. It was the easiest way to escape, or she thought. But everywhere she looked, she saw herself mid failure. Each memory calcified before her eyes, trapped forever in gray stone. She unsheathed one dagger after the next, tossing them at each of her failures. Tobias, journal and quill in hand, attempted to document the cursed trees. But one hissed at him in a woman's voice that accosted his ears. He fainted. Brugimili began composing Lullaby for a Scholar, but was soon drawn away from their fallen friend. The mage regained consciousness surrounded by petrified trees. Leaping to his feet, he stunned, desperate to escape what each tree reflected towards him. Everywhere he turned was an unfinished spell. Each one whispered, "You will always ruin the magic you touch." He spun until he collapsed, surrounded by the spells that hissed his failures back at him. Every spell cracked and turned to stone around him, brittle with disappointment. Somewhere between panic and silence, Brug's voice rose, fragile at first, then defiant. They sang of heroes far and wide. The trees became their audience, stone-faced, unblinking. One by one they turned away. The silence that followed the loudest sound was Brug had ever heard. It was perfectly in pitch. Fear, when properly aged, was a fine wine, addictive and likely to make you do foolish things. Timber, having finished her stolen jerky, trotted deeper into the ruins quiet. Her head snapped from Kaelin, frozen on her knees, to Tobias running in circles like he was chasing his tail, to Brug sobbing while they sang a soulful ballad. The thing about a loyal animal companion is they are allowed to mess with the humans they claimed, but no one or nothing else had the same permission. Timber howled, then snarled. It wasn't loud but low and certain. It promised violence, the immediate kind. She lunged through the illusion, tormenting Kaelin, teething, flashing as she tore through the petrified assassin statue. The stone shattered like brittle bones. The assassin blinked, dazed for a moment, before showing the lingering dread where it belonged, and somewhere easy to ignore and likely to be forgotten. Aurora's end found its way into her hand. For one treacherous beat, Stride's words echoed inside her, and she wanted to believe them. Instead, she moved, her muscle memory taking over, even while her mind froze. One practiced flick, her dagger flew, shattering the illusion's hold on Tobias. He halted mid-circle, panting as if he'd ran a marathon, possibly waiting to stand still. Timber tore through the illusion of holding Brug captive. The bard strummed a discordant chord on his lute that vibrated through the streets. The cord rippled through the ruins, snapping the spell's hold. Each of them shook the visions that would haunt them for years, and buried them deep in the kind of place no one names out loud. Illusions are the easiest broken by those who've already accepted reality. Dogs, for instance. Kaelin retrieved her dagger, wiping it on her thigh before returning to its sheath. Tobias, hand shaking, walked to the center of the ruins, drawn by the mosaics surrounded by petrified trees. Timber padded after him, followed by the rest of the group. Sprawled before the mosaic of a doomed empire devouring itself as thrones toppled and palaces burned, outlined by a gold chain that weaved into familiar symbols shining at the top center. The chain wrapped itself around a quill that bled ink. Under it, the words and the bond's bleed pulsed, as if they remembered every oath taken. The image burned its way into her brain. She lingered, suddenly ill from the dread of recognizing something she wished she hadn't. Some symbols don't fade with empires. They just change stationary. The quill and chain, it reminds me of something. Tobias stroked his chin and trembling hand. Where have I seen it before? Brug hummed in a slow, mournful tune. The sound vibrated into stone trunks, echoing like trapped memories. The symbol burned itself into Kaylin's mind. She had seen the mark before, carved into contracts, pressed into wax, written into her life before she learned how to read it. It shouldn't be here. It belonged to shadows and contracts, not ruins and empires. But lies travel well. She turned, running away from what she had seen every She turned, running away from what she'd seen, everything it meant. The ruins faded behind them as they stepped into the forest. A normal one, with no scared trees in sight. Next time, we take the road that doesn't obsess over our failures. Kaylin tried to mask her shaken state with sarcasm. The only person she fooled was herself. Tobias nodded, clutching his notes. I think that was quite productive. His tone was chipper, even though his voice shook. Is this trauma or melody? Brug asked. And so, our intrepid party carried on. Slightly more traumatized, moderately less dignified, and with considerably more respect for dogs. Onward, then, to Gravemire, where bureaucracy flirts with necromancy, and both require you to sign in triplicate. What could possibly go wrong? And that is it for chapter 8, and we're going to stop here for our read of Side Quest. If you're joining us in, thank you so much for listening in to this story by Stephanie K. Clemens. I hope you're enjoying it. Let's see, we have a few comments in the chat. I can really see this as a small animation series. Hell yeah. I will definitely pass on that message over to Stephanie. I'm sure she would very much appreciate it. And if you want to just continue listening into Side Quest, all videos will be available on demand, and we are available online. You can listen to us on the Twitch channel on Mondays and Wednesdays at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time, where we'll read another few chapters of Side Quest until this book is complete. Until then, thank you so much for joining us this evening at the Wisteria Cottage for story time. And with that said, you know what? I think we can go ahead and read a channel. I mean, what channel shall we read today? All right. I'm gonna quickly raid into Ryuga's channel. I probably haven't been to where they're playing, so gonna sneak right in.